Corsicana is home to a tiny but active Jewish community. Once a month, these Navarro County residents and neighbors gather at Temple Bethel, a beautiful historic building nestled in the middle of town, to observe Shabbat services in honor of Judaism's Day of Rest. Rabbi Frank Joseph is the spiritual guide of Jewish Corsicana.
Around 1997, I'd started going to Corsicana quite frequently on Saturday mornings to do services there. And I continued to do that up until 2000. But in 2000, my wife and I moved to the Rio Grande Valley. I became the rabbi in Brownsville and Harlingen. And so we were 500 miles away, and we weren't coming back once a week then.
Between the 1890s through the 1960s, Corsicana was the home of two Jewish congregations, a Reform congregation based out of the onion-domed Temple Bethel, and an Orthodox congregation based out of Temple Aguda Sahim. By 2000, both of these congregations had disbanded, and their temples were sold to the city of Corsicana.
I was getting calls frequently to officiate at funerals for members of the Corsicana community. It's wonderful to be able to officiate at the funerals because there's a connection there, know the families and know the people, and it's meaningful. But what I would really like to do is something that represented the future for Corsicana. My goal is I want to keep my father's legacy alive. It's very, 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 very important to me to keep his legacy, what he devoted 30 years of his life to the rabbin Corsicana, to keep that going.
Rabbi Frank's father, Ernest Joseph, was also a rabbi in Corsicana. Born in Germany in 1930, Ernest Joseph and his family escaped the Jewish Holocaust by fleeing to Shanghai, China, and eventually settling in Dallas, Texas in the late 1940s. Ernest Joseph arrived in Corsicana in 1957, a promising young spiritual leader for the local Jewish community.
And they knew that he was a tremendous scholar and that he was extremely educated in everything Jewish and had a tremendous passion for that. And so they invited him to come work for the Woolens Company with the thought that eventually he would be the rabbi of the city.
Ernest Joseph became rabbi of Corsicana's two congregations in the mid-1960s. For more than 30 years, Rabbi Ernest led tremendous efforts to preserve and perpetuate Judaism in Corsicana. Rabbi Ernest passed away in 1999, leaving his son, Rabbi Frank, to carry on his legacy.
In 2006, we started having services again at Temple Bethel. There weren't a lot of members of Corsicana still there, maybe 5 families, maybe 6 families, but we got people that were like us that were coming from Dallas, that were coming from Waxahachie, that were coming from other areas that had a connection to Corsicana.
From the 1960s onward, Jewish residents began to leave Corsicana in search of better jobs and opportunities. However, connections to people and places in town continue to bring them back. The Hebrew Cemetery of Corsicana, for example, continues to have burials, sometimes even for individuals who have never lived in the area.
Family is so important in Judaism. That, I would say, is the main reason that the cemetery is so important. And people will still continue to be buried at the cemetery. Another is because the cemetery is kept up. They do a wonderful job in Corsicana with keeping the Hebrew cemetery well kept.
According to Rabbi Frank, community is very important in Judaism. Look no further than Corsicana's Jewish civic leader, Babette Samuels. Babette touched many lives in town, including through multiple volunteer roles supporting Corsicana schools and school groups, Bunert Park's annual MLK celebration, and the Corsicana Hebrew Cemetery Association. Babette passed away in 2022, but her civic efforts are fondly remembered by many in town.
The Jewish community was very involved because there's a principle in Judaism. It's not a biblical commandment, but it's a rabbinical commandment that you were obligated to serve your community. There's a saying, don't separate yourself from the community, but rather be actively involved in the affairs of your community. So it's a commandment to be involved in the affairs of the community, not only the religious community, i.e. the synagogue, but the community at large.
In Rabbi Frank's view, the Jewish community experience in Corsicana has been overwhelmingly positive.
Corsicana as a city, as a community, is not at all anti-Semitic. In fact, when the Klan started, they had activity there in the 1920s, and the community as a whole rejected the Klan because they knew like the Jewish people, and they didn't want harm coming to them or to other members. But overall, it was not encouraged; it was rejected. Corsicana does not, as a community, does not support that type of behavior.
Rabbi Frank described one main reason for the Jewish exodus from Corsicana.
For leaving has only been job, for career, profession.